everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Allison Oots, and I'm going to be hosting this meeting today. I'm a part of Flyreel, which is an InsurTech providing insurance carriers with an AI-driven virtual home inspection tool. And I'm really happy to be here and a part of InsurTech Denver. So I'll go ahead and introduce us as an organization. So we're locally run by executives in the insurance and InsurTech space. And our intention is really just to bring people together in the industry and create, an innovative space for folks to share ideas and spread knowledge. So we would really encourage everyone here to follow our InsurTech Denver LinkedIn company page. We just hit 200 followers, so that was a big milestone. And just only up from here. So I'll send that link in the chat so everyone can go follow us. And then lastly, we are still contemplating getting back together for an in-person event. We would love to have a social event, so more to come on that later this year. And we're very excited. So with that, welcome to our virtual panel. Today, we will be talking about open source, API, and the new integrated insurance industry. So this is of great interest to everyone, especially in the market, and we really encourage your questions and comments in the chat so we can answer those during the panel. So now our moderator Maria will take over and start with introducing our panel.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. This is super exciting to be here. My name is Maria Fujinami. I'm the Director of Agency Success at Glovebox, and I have the distinct honor of introducing today's panelists. Wilson Hughes should be joining us shortly. Clark Woodward, and he is the CEO of RedZone. Jessi West Gunteski, Director of Marketing and Public Relations at OneClick. We are super excited to have you guys join us today, especially to address this topic. I'm going to start by asking Jessi and also Clark to talk a bit about your company, who your company is, and what your company does. And we'll get started that way. And then as we go through some of the questions, please feel free to jump in. I know that each of you has a lot of insight that you can share with us. So it's a casual conversation. So let's get started. Jessi, are you okay to get us started and tell us about who your company is and what does your company do?
Absolutely. Thank you, Maria, for introducing me and having me on this panel. I was going to say Daniel. Thank you for introducing me to this.
Yeah.
As a startup, it's always so fun to speak about our companies and share wisdom so that we can all grow and gain knowledge from each other. And I'm just thrilled to be here to learn, but also share some of our stories. OneClick is pretty new to the industry. We've been around since 2018. We're an app for the roofing restoration industry, and our tagline is accurate codes, accurate claims. So when a roof needs to be repaired or replaced, contractors and insurance adjusters are currently using outdated and manual systems to gather building code and permit information to create an estimate. And these antiquated systems leave money on the table. They waste massive amounts of time. And they also create conflict between the contractor and the insurance adjuster over who is right, who has the right information. And so what we've done is we've automated building codes across the country. And we're currently working on doing the same with permitting data. It's taken a long time to get there, and we have a patent over this, but we're really excited to share it with the nation. And our app instantly gives you accurate data to build a defensible estimate. So for insurance companies, we've seen decreased cycle times, improved claims leakage, and reduction in the friction between all parties. And that's the big one for us. We firmly believe in providing transparency through accurate data in order to build trust for an industry in which trust has been lost or was never there to begin with. So that's what we do. And thank you for having me. I'm excited to hear everything to come.
Oh, super exciting. Clark?
Thank you, Maria. So my name is Clark Woodward, and I'm the CEO of RedZone. I wouldn't call us a startup anymore because we've been around for 20 years, which is like absolutely crazy. And we model wildfires, and we really come at them from two different directions. So we help companies monitor the wildfires and track them in real time. And the ways that we can help companies is we interact with their customers. So we help give people a heads up when they're being evacuated, whether their home is at risk or maybe it's been lost. And by staying on top of that fire, we can really help that homeowner either get started with a claim or simply give them really good information. And we come from a background in fire management. We were volunteer firefighters, we were incident managers, and we really brought that sort of public safety record into insurance. And so we've worked with carriers for more than 2 decades. We also provide an underwriting tool. And it's funny that the bar has been pretty low for wildfire risk scoring for many, many years. And as losses have climbed, people are looking for a tool that really takes like a deep dive into it. And so we work with underwriting and we work with portfolio managers to do concentration modeling. And it's an exciting time for us because wildfire is like front and center of across the country. So our little business is as busy as it can be. So I'm really, really excited to be here. Thank you.
And really through climate change, we've seen an increase in wildfires. So clearly for insurance carriers, they're looking for a solution. And that makes a lot of sense, truly. So while I have you, Clark, talk to us a little bit about, in your opinion, do APIs reduce costs? And if so, how?
Well, I mean, the answer is absolutely yes. And when we first got into the industry, say a decade ago, all of our customers wanted to take our model and put it on their server. But today, I don't think we have anybody asking us that. And when I look at APIs, I would say yes, they save you money because the carrier or the company can outsource their expertise. Their internal staff don't need to know everything because what they're buying from you, from RedZone, is the trust that we've done our due diligence and we've got a model and a product that's that they can integrate and they can make better decisions with it. There's lots of advantages, like you don't have to update it. You don't have to store it. You don't have to program or code to it. So an API gives you all of those advantages. And the other thing I think an API does for you is that you can ask a question. You can be very granular about the types of questions they ask. And a lot of our customers will hit our service 10, 15 times as a policy goes through the process of being quoted and underwritten and bound. And so they have that data at their fingertips. Now, I mean, APIs also cost you money, and it's really upfront. So a lot of our big insurance carriers are just moving toward an API-driven approach, and they're paying to catch up. And we've often found that it was more expensive for them to integrate our software than it was to actually buy the software, to buy our service. So it's often that internal cost that's quite higher than the vendor itself.
Jessi, you have anything that you'd like to share from that perspective, from your viewpoint?
Yeah, I can actually mirror a lot of what Clark said. I resonated with every aspect of it. I've noticed that in terms of cost for the carrier, it's exactly what Clark highlighted, that oftentimes the cost can be, well, it depends on the vendor and what their pricing structure is, but it's oftentimes cheaper to integrate rather than buy the product outright. So we do see it as a cost savings for a lot of these companies, and also just having the availability to get someone else's proprietary data can be invaluable. So without having to do all that legwork for their teams internally, absolutely, it can be a cost saver, not monetarily, but from building out a giant team to gather all of this data that they would otherwise need to do.
how do you think carriers are adapting to the challenges of APIs, and which of them are out ahead, and why and how?
I mean, I really believe that these companies that are moving forward with digitization are really the ones who are out ahead, because a lot of these antiquated systems just aren't serving people anymore.
Yeah.
And especially more customer facing platforms for insurance carriers, those are extremely important to get digitized, and having APIs to really bring in that robust data is extremely important. From a very basic standpoint, that's, yes.
Yeah, I think the struggle too is probably those smaller carriers that maybe have not even built APIs, and dealing with that situation can be a bit challenging. And I'm not quite sure how we get around that. Any thoughts on that? How do we encourage?
Well, I think we're seeing a significant move toward underwriting platforms, claims platforms, whether it be a Duck Creek or a Guidewire or InsurTech, and that gets you out of the gate with a tool that can be integrated with other APIs, and you're spending less time thinking about the basics and more time thinking about how to get to work.
Yeah, that's great. So can you share, Clark, any anecdotes or stories that come to mind that might show how things have changed with APIs in the last couple of years? What about open source as an example?
Well,
and Clark, just, hey, everybody, Wilson's joined. I've been joined since the beginning, but due to an internet outage, it was,
oh, so glad you joined.
Yeah, so this was and I'm happy to address this question, Clark, if you'd like me to take it. We do a lot in terms of open source.
Sure, go ahead.
So hey everybody, Wilson Hughes, and I'm with Yonomi. Just a little bit of background. Yonomi has it essentially sells a middleware platform, if you will, for smart devices. Essentially what we do is we take the most popular smart devices and we make them available for use in B2B solutions. So as you might example, taking a lock and a motion sensor, maybe a flood detector, or even a carbon monoxide or a smoke detector, and turning that into a full solution for home monitoring, as an example, or age in place. And open source is actually a big part of what we need to rely on in a couple of ways. One is the leveraging or using open source technology. A couple of examples: OpenID Connect as a mechanism for integrating authorization. So a lot of you guys have actually, if you haven't heard of OpenID Connect, you've used it. Anytime you've logged into a site or leveraged a site where you use your Gmail account, or if you're a developer, GitHub account or your Facebook account to authorize that third-party site. And that's an open standard that was sort of opened up by Facebook, I think, in 2016. That really has, from a standards perspective, really revolutionized how we authorize. And I apologize, OpenID Connect is an open standard. Another open standard is a technology called GraphQL, which that was a Facebook technology. And that leverages a good amount of essentially taking, if you guys are familiar with the old style SQL mechanism for querying data, it APIifies it's an APIified query language, if you will. So instead of sort of reaching out to an API and getting information back, now you can actually deliberately request only a certain amount of information from an API, receive what you want back, and process only that information. Both of those are open source standards. Not only do we leverage them internally, but then we turn around and expose those and make our capabilities open source for the APIs that we expose on our side. So open source has been a big part of the mechanism for us to grow really as a company and innovate more effectively than we have.
That's great. Thank you for that. Clark, you have any particular stories or anecdotes you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I might build on that a little bit. And 5 years ago, I would say that all of our customers really wanted us to be on Microsoft. Microsoft servers using Active Directory, and they had a suspicion around open source. And it made sense because at the time, open source was less adopted and less mainstream. But I mean, today, like the world runs on open source. It's, it's Linux, it's technologies. And really, I think there's two kind of key takeaways. One is to think about patching, because many people think, okay, open source must be more vulnerable because it's out there in the world. But realistically, all of the big exploits that we've seen in the last couple of years have been proprietary technology, and putting open source out on the market and letting hackers and anybody really penetrate that software and close those gaps is actually making that software and more robust than proprietary technologies. And oftentimes we heard from our customers that like licensing was the big one. We can't use open source because we're going to get into a licensing snafu. And I would say that we've seen a big shift away, toward open Apache licensing. And today, most of our customers want us to be responsible, and B, to be studied by a third party, to go out and do a vulnerability assessment, have somebody poke holes at your company. Because again, they're coming back to that trust. Do we trust that your organization is doing a good job? And can we entrust you with our data?
Yeah, excellent points for sure. Wilson, I'm going to come back to you again. And do your products and APIs affect underwriting or claims processes? And if both, which one is more effective? And if just one, have you thought about expanding your API for the other?
Yeah, so one thing that we're careful about is our technology is leveraged as a horizontal platform. And so insurance is one of the use cases on top of which our technology sits. And so both claims and underwriting are components of solutions that are built leveraging our technology. I can tell you that the underwriting process is probably weighs more heavily in terms of the technology use. And one of the reasons, when you talk about underwriting, or at least sort of evaluating what are you going to, price a policy, our goal is essentially to provide as much data, as much meaningful data, as often as possible and as real time as possible, while still, accounting for the privacy concerns and needs of a homeowner. And so when you grant the authority for a device to be leveraged by our platform for the use in an insurance solution, the idea is that it's going to benefit you. And so a lot of customers love to sign up for something that's going to reduce their policy. But if you tell them, yeah, we're going to be paying attention to your, we're going to be seeing how if your water's leaking or if you're smoking in your house or whatever, that becomes a concern. So I can tell you that it's a little bit of a slow roll in terms of claims, but that underwriting is definitely something that is leveraged more readily, both by the insurance companies as well as but by customers who are interested. So everyone obviously wants to prevent a leak in their home or a fire, and so leveraging it for the purpose of ensuring that a device, as an example, has a heartbeat. Is the smoke detector, does it have a battery? Is it powered? Are you using it and having the insight to be able to provide that detail is important. But I'd say that we don't want to position ourselves as saying, hey, you did or did not have the device operating, and therefore, your claim is not going to be denied. So I'd say underwriting right now more, and once the technology is a bit more adopted and used more widely, you'll see claims become much more popular in terms of the use for this.
Yeah, certainly we don't want to come across, I would imagine, penalizing a client, but it should be a win-win situation for the carrier, pricing it appropriately, and for the client ultimately gaining from that premium decrease if it's possible in any scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And one of the most important things for us to do is to maintain that trust. We've been entrusted with establishing a connection between a homeowner, their devices, and an insurance company. And so for us, it's very important that we don't betray that trust.
Absolutely. And I would imagine from Jessi's standpoint and Clark's from their company view, same, you certainly want to maintain that trust via the information that you're gathering and producing back. Any thoughts on that, any additional thoughts on or commentary on this, the underwriting approach versus claims?
I mean, I think we're seeing a big shift. I think underwriting has always been somewhat API driven, looking to third parties to score and analyze. And claims is, coming to the table more often. And we're seeing requests for, geospatial data. Help us analyze who's impacted and predict or estimate, how many people are we going to need. And, just getting that efficiency, because otherwise claims has been a war room type of, operation. Bring everybody together, put the plans out and start getting to work. And there's just so many fun opportunities to optimize that.
Yeah. So I'll ask this question to all of you, but I'll start with you, Clark, since you're on right now. What can current startups do to position themselves better in the current market? And how can they leverage the rules of the new API economy to accelerate growth?
Well, I mean, I think the thing, I asked my team this, and the number one thing that we came up with is to be backwards compatible and while still forward thinking. We have SOAP APIs that have been out there for, 15 years, and our customers are not moving, very quickly. But when we have a good new idea, we really want to bring that to market. And so what we do is we use, additional parameters and just keep giving people a new way to ask questions. I mean, I think the other thing that we always try to do is make sure that we're not providing just data, but we're trying to provide answers and insight. And, we go to head with a couple of companies that have a ton of data. Here are 50 data points about your problem. Well, what people really want, is a couple of key answers and then some supporting data. How did you arrive at this so you don't have such a black box?
Yeah, the other thing too is there's so much data, but yet, what are they really looking at and what are they going to do with the data? So you'll point to some key data points that they can do something with is critical, I think. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I'm kind of on the other side. We don't really affect the underwriting side quite yet. It's on the product roadmap, but we're very heavily in the claim side. And because we're helping insurance adjusters and contractors build the estimate that gets submitted for the claim, right? So we have this robust data platform, but to your point, Clark, we have to back it up with the letters from the municipalities saying, yes, that building code line item is enforced. Yes, that's the jurisdiction that's assigned to that property. And one of the biggest things for us is leveraging that claims process, because if we can get into the claims process and provide those data points via API or not to the insurance company, then they're one step ahead to providing their customer with a more accurate estimate as well. So it's interesting to hear the other side of the underwriting and then the claims side. But I think one thing for us that we've noticed looking back, hindsight is always 20/20, but if we were to do it all over again, we'd look at tools that provide more single sign-on from the beginning, using more or open source tools that are available to build out more robust API from the get-go. And then one other thing that we see that's huge for us is researching what your target customer is currently using and building that out from the beginning, especially if you're B2B, because all three of those things will set you up with easy customer integration from the get-go when your customer is ready to hop on board.
Yeah, ultimately the goal is superior client experience. And so whether it's on the claims or underwriting side, what the client is feeling ultimately from the data sources and so on is important. So Wilson, if you were starting the same company from scratch today, what open source software or new APIs might you consider using or integrating to make your product even better?
Yeah, so I'm
loaded question for you.
Yeah. So I'm part of the sales team, the technical component of the sales team, and I think about this a lot. And the value of our technology is that smart devices are deployed and out there, and they're readily able and available to be used. But the fact is, not every homeowner has a smart smoke detector or a lock, or and so one of the challenges I think we face is obviously there's an uptake that needs to occur, but giving companies the ability to simulate more effectively early on, I think it would have been a great idea. And it's something that's on our roadmap, but I can tell, if I were starting this company, it would have been one of the first things I would have created, was this concept of virtualizing the APIs to support device capabilities, so that I can, simulate 10, 20, 30,000 smoke detectors in a single area, or simulate what does the data look like for a device that's doesn't report a low battery but has one. So those capabilities and providing that en masse would have been phenomenal, I think, in terms of getting this stuff out a lot sooner. Now it's happening. I mean, we happen to be working on things like that, but that's definitely something that I would have added on early. Yeah.
Well, one always needs to start at the beginning and then evolve as time goes on.
Yeah.
It doesn't start right off the gate. But as we learn about the businesses, it just naturally evolves, and it's great. The learning.
Yeah. And we have learned a ton, and one of the gaps is exactly that at scale, you can begin to see more patterns that you otherwise don't see with 200, 300, 400 devices. So
yeah, and keeping in mind that also from a carrier standpoint, they're looking at different client segments, and so there's different needs for clients within a geographic location,
exactly,
values of homes, and so on, and so that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, yeah. And the regionality of the differences in how things are priced and what devices show up in a home versus what others don't. Is a big part of is expanding the scope and scale of what we can support and what we decide is a smart device that's meaningful for insurance versus meaningful for another industry.
Sure. And then you always have the other layer to that, which is every carrier has its own preferences from an underwriting standpoint as to what they deem necessary as far as number of devices per home, number of smoke detectors, and all that. You have to take that into consideration as well. So trying to please all types can be challenging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. That's great. Anything else you guys would like to add before I ask Allison to see if there's any questions? I see some chatting going on in the chat.
No questions in the chat so far. I'll keep you up.
So Maria, I would add one experience. So if we were to start over, I think we've learned a lot about meeting our customers where they're at. And, we often, a good example is the customer will have, 500,000 policies and they want to send them to you. And they, their IT team says, hey, do you have an API that I can do an add, delete, and update? And, we often say yes. And then they end up there like, well, but we really just need to send you a CSV. Like we have to go low tech. And so building the ideal API internally and then putting that nice soft layer that they can go low tech is a nice way of meeting that customer where they are, even if their aspirations are to be, real time, they're just not there yet. And so it gives it's a good mix and it meets their need today and helps bring them on as a customer, which I think was a good lesson for us.
Yeah, that's great. That's great insight for sure. Yeah. Anything else you guys?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm gonna sort of double up on that. That idea of sort of meeting the customer where they are is especially important, I think, in insurance, which is not necessarily a sort of frontline technology company. They're not working in the spaces that CSV files are a regular occurrence for the integration requirements for us. We don't have a single, every time we work with one, there's definitely someone out, some of the work being outsourced to someone who can turn a CSV into a REST API call or GraphQL call. In addition to that, starting with the user interface, giving them sample, a starter app, if you will, to get some of these ideas going, and being able to integrate third-party services very easily, I think is a big deal for insurance companies. Something that we have actually deployed, and it happens to be open source technology now for us to provide demo apps. So if you want to get going, you just go to our GitHub and grab the bits for that. Now, there's obviously still a gap. You got to have a developer to be able to use the stuff, build it and slap your logo in it. But meeting the customer is, I think, particularly important in this industry.
Yeah, I agree. I always thought that everyone was at the same place, but they're clearly not. And there's some large insurance carriers that are not there either from a technology, digital standpoint. So yeah, I completely agree. An excellent point to meet the client at where they are, for sure. Yeah.
Maria, I got a question that I can read.
Awesome.
When you look at the API technology gap, is that gap with carriers, agencies, MGAs, so on?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of everywhere. And maybe the more long-standing companies are playing, catch up faster than the new entrants to the market, because the new entrants just are able to lay that foundation with, other third-party tools.
Excellent.
Yeah, from our perspective, from what we've seen, I think the gap is essentially it's a technology gap for the teams that are evaluating this type of solution. In other words, working with IoT technology, typically, what we found is that carriers like to sort of just outsource that and say, go find, build us a solution, figure it out for us. We will pipe you over a CSV file or some data. And we'd like to gather sort of the learnings from that through your proof of concept or through your, your pilot or what have you. And so it's a little bit, they want to get the sort of an understanding and get the research and understand where the value of these devices exist. But it's a little more hands-off in terms of who's doing the work. So from my perspective, I don't know if I know quite where the where the technology gap is, who it sits with, other than providing a package solution seems to be a pretty important component of helping move the industry along, from a technical perspective on these things.
Yeah.
And I'd say it's like a case by case basis too, because like you were saying, Maria, like some of these smaller companies, have a completely different tech stack than a larger company. So it's really a case by case situation. And especially when you're dealing with APIs leading access to proprietary data, there's always levels of security to go through. So that might be a gap that's creating issues. And it's always about making sure that all the tech is playing nicely with each other. So the gaps can just be in between what the customer is using, what you're using. It's just kind of all over the board.
Yeah. And there are some carriers, I believe, out there, they may not even have built APIs yet. And then some that have may also feel that they can't let go of their customer data. It's their bread and butter, and they have a hard time letting go. So yeah, it's a challenge.
To build on Jessi's point, I would say that we often feel more like a point in the network, a node in the network, where our carriers are asking us to go buy some third-party data. Hey, can you geocode this, because we haven't geocoded it? So go to this vendor to geocode, or to get a tax value, or or a roof type. And in the same way, we're getting purchased on behalf of a carrier by another vendor. And so those partnerships are really becoming, I think, a key strategy for us, is that we're building, with companies like we probably have on the panel today, or on the call today, is those kind of partnerships is just lowering the bar and making that data available when they need it, when a carrier really needs it.
Excellent. point.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that we're seeing too is that this process of talking to insurance carriers about technology adoption has been speeding up significantly.
Yeah.
Daniel and I actually wrote a white paper about this, but we've seen huge changes in anywhere from the initial phone call to setting up the pilot to even the negotiations. Everything is moving faster from our perspective, at least in the roofing claims world, because people are wanting to move forward with digitization so quickly. They're realizing that if they don't, they're behind.
Yeah, agreed. I see that in the carrier landscape, everyone wants to be a digital company, and we're seeing that as well as in the independent agency market as well. Everyone is realizing they have to be known as a digital company, and so that's driving that also, I think, which is a good thing. We need to continue to move forward for sure. Gosh, I really appreciate the time, your time, Jessi, Wilson, and Clark. It was such a pleasure to talk to you guys today. We hope to have you back at some point. I'm sure we have much more to talk about. And I bet we could, over some cocktails, talk a little bit even deeper about APIs. I don't know. I think it would be an ideal conversation.
Oh, boy.
But yeah, exactly. Do we have any questions, Allison? I don't want to close without checking.
We have one more question. It kind of
Okay.
counters what Jessi was just saying, but I'll ask it. We hear about digital acceleration as a result of COVID, but it sounds like some of you may not have experienced that acceleration. And if you haven't, what do you think is holding companies back?
Interesting.
I mean, we've seen both sides of it. So, right, we've seen some of them accelerate and we've seen others take a step back. And I think it kind of goes back to Maria's point of these companies wanting to hold on to their legacy systems and not wanting to dive deep into changing everything that they've spent so long building. So we see that some are still hesitant while as others are jumping right on board. So it's, again, a case-by-case situation from our company's perspective.
Yeah, from our perspective, I mean, I don't want this to disturb anybody, but we've seen significant growth by startups. Startups took the opportunity and ran with it, while a lot of the established companies we were working with slowed down. And so what I expect to see, frankly, in 12 to 24 months is a lot of the more capable startups start to have an impact. And this is every industry, including insurance. Obviously, as I mentioned, we're a horizontal. Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I'd say that you're right. The question is sort of, on one side, we saw a little bit of slowdown, but that was for some of the older companies. And there were some companies that were established that did take advantage of this, but far less than the number of startups that we saw really engaging and sort of entering into the market and building technology that really has yet to have an impact that, I think we'll start seeing in the next year.
Yeah, interesting question. Well, I think I hate to say goodbye at this point. I so enjoy the conversation. Thank you for joining us today. I'm sure we have recorded the session, so we'll be sharing it on our page on Facebook. So we're excited about it. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time. And let's march on. API, yay.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessi and Wilson.
Thanks, everyone.